Tuesday just happened, but we have more elections coming up next week. We're going to look ahead to those upcoming primaries.
Joining us this morning, Democratic strategist Colin Rogero and Axios White House reporter Elena Treen. Elena, welcome to the show.
Yeah,
and Colin,
first time. We're so glad to have you.
I'm
Welcome.
so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So
Colin
let's start.
will take it easy. We'll make him be nice today.
I'll be nice. I'll do my best. I'll be on my best behavior.
He's a docile
I want to
guy.
scare you away.
Let's start with these
known for
upcoming
that.
primaries, okay? So we've got the Michigan, Washington, Missouri, Mississippi, Idaho, and North Dakota primaries, Colin. Now, noteworthy, I think Sanders only won Michigan and Washington of these the last time around. So he's in a bit of a tough spot.
Those are the two biggest ones, though.
Yeah,
so
those are the two biggest ones with the most delegates. Michigan, I heard that he did do a recent media buy, not feeling as solid about it as he was last time around. And we haven't seen you since the entire Biden consolidation. So give us your general thoughts on that and what's happened in the last week.
So look, I think Michigan is going to be a very interesting state to watch.
Yeah.
I think Biden or Bernie won it last time, obviously against Hillary, but he's facing someone who doesn't have Hillary's baggage now, and who is also a pretty influential person in the auto industry bailout. So Joe Biden has a story to tell there, and I think it's one that'll be powerful.
Right.
Joe Biden has made a media buy. They've both made a media buy. So whatever we can make of that, we should. And I think it's still pretty competitive and will be. I think the rest of the states, aside from Washington, really do tilt Joe Biden's way.
Right.
I think the overall phenomenon here is, I used to play football and I used to run track. And in track, they would talk about peaking at the right time.
Yeah.
And I think in the primaries, Joe Biden peaked at the right time.
Which is pretty remarkable.
That's well said. I mean, Michigan, we shouldn't forget, Elena, is where Bernie staged this massive 22-point comeback on Hillary Clinton. He narrowly beats her. This was like a big surge of energy into his campaign. So Michigan was very good to him last time. Washington is a good state for him as well. I think that's one that you would expect at least him, even with all that momentum behind Joe Biden, to hold on to. But I think that Colin is absolutely right. Like, Michigan is going to be critical because if he's going to even be able to stay in this game, he has to make sure he at least is competitive in the industrial Midwest. And we had Minnesota on Super Tuesday. We haven't had a lot of Midwestern states yet. Minnesota, he surprisingly lost. Of course, Amy Klobuchar loomed large in her endorsement there. But I do think that is going to be the one to absolutely watch.
Totally. And I think that if you look at what happened on Super Tuesday, especially accounting for, a lot of people had cast early ballots before Joe Biden's big win in South Carolina. Yeah. People had voted already for Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. So a lot of the states and the delegates that Bernie Sanders had won on Super Tuesday could very well have been affected by that.
Yeah.
I think as we look into the next 2 weeks, we have a ton of states on Tuesday, and then again on March 17th with Florida and some of those other key states. They're all states that Biden is poised to win. He does really well. If we look at what he did on Tuesday, he did really well with upper and middle class voters. He did great in the rural areas and among suburban women and suburban voters. The only places he really didn't do that well was the super progressive activist areas and college towns, which Bernie Sanders definitely does very well with, and heavy Latino populations and communities. And so if we look ahead at the next few primaries, those are all places that Biden is in a very good position to take.
Right. Yeah. And Colin, Florida, you know the state well, and this is the interesting part. It's the only state where Sanders' Latino strategy is not born to yield the results that it did in Texas and elsewhere, because the population is just fundamentally different.
It's completely different. All over the country. Arizona is not a fair comparison to California, is not a fair comparison to Texas. And that's why I think Joe Biden did a lot better in Texas than he did in California. It's just the groups of Latinos, it's not a homogenous group, right?
Yeah.
And Florida, and even South Florida, is significantly different. Yeah. And those voters do not favor Bernie. I've been down there. I do a lot of work there. I'm from there originally. And I can tell you the non-Cuban Latinos, and even the Cuban Latinos who vote in the Democratic primary, the socialist tag is a very difficult thing for him to overcome in those communities because they come from socialist.
They're from like Venezuela.
Countries. Yeah,
and
Venezolanos,
you add to that an older demographic. Florida has a lot of delegates at stake, right? It's got to be one of the toughest states in the country for Bernie Sanders, and there's a lot at stake there. Going back to the primaries that are happening next week, The Sanders team is prosecuting this case against Joe Biden on trade, in particular, in Michigan. And look, this was a big liability for Hillary Clinton, not only in the primaries, but ultimately it was a big liability for her that they didn't necessarily see coming in the general election. Joe Biden's record is arguably worse than hers on trade. He still backs TPP, right? She tried to say, oh, I don't back it now, and it rang a little bit hollow, but he backed NAFTA, backed trade relationship with China, backed TPP. The Sanders team is banking a lot on the fact that that will be a problem for Joe Biden when voters learn about it in Michigan.
Definitely. And I think that it's actually a taste of what I know, just having spoken with people on the Trump campaign, that they've been really planning this arsenal of attacks against Joe Biden as well for potential general. And trade is a huge issue,
yes,
especially in those places like Michigan and some of these key swing states that will be so important in the general. Bernie Sanders is taking the same strategy. He's going to go after him on NAFTA. He's going to go after him for all of the trade agreements that really were symbolic of the Obama administration and try to pinpoint him there. And there's a ton of people in some of these more purple states and in Michigan and some of these places that we'll be seeing vote next week that Biden will have a tough time answering to.
Here's a question, Colin, that we were floating in our post-live show, which is that those voters who ended up voting for Trump, are they gone forever? Are they not even Democrats in the Republican primary?
Are they gone to Democrats?
Are they gone for Democrats?
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I believe a lot of those people thought they were going to see fundamental change with Trump, and they've seen some fundamental change, but not the kind that they were looking for. And I also think, to the previous question, voters who are concerned with NAFTA are many in a Democratic primary are more concerned with beating Trump. Right. And so that favors Biden. As we got to remember, Biden was leading the polls early.
I think the thing that they need to do here, though, is that this is, yes, it's a values case. It's an electability case, right? Joe Biden has the same bad stances on these issues as caused Hillary Clinton to lose. Like, that's, to me, where the dots need to be connected, because you're right. There's no coming, if he can't make the electability case, there's no coming back. For young voters, they're voting on values. Like, that's what we see in the poll. They're voting for Medicare for all, they're voting for Green New Deal. For people over the age of 30, it's basically like beat Trump, beat Trump, beat Trump, beat Trump. Those are their top issues. And there is a case to be told there that Bernie tried to make last night with Rachel Maddow about, like, look, if we run the same old, if we run Hillary Clinton 2.0, we're going to lose again. And trade is a big part of that. And trade will be a big part of the Trump case against Joe Biden.
Yeah. Look, I think that is a danger. And anybody who runs a Hillary 2.0 case is coming from a position of hubris in certain states, and we should never repeat that mistake again as Democrats, period.
Yeah.
We have to win everywhere, every vote, every city, even ones that lean Democratic, especially against a non-traditional candidate like Trump. However, I don't think that, the comparison between the Hillary campaign and the Biden campaign is a fair one, because unfortunately in this country, it's still much harder to get elected as a woman than it is a man. So there is that to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And Joe Biden's not facing that. And also, he's on a wave right now. And I think that wave is going to continue to push him forward.
I think you're probably right about that. I think on the plus for Joe Biden, people like him. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And Hillary, look, let's not forget, Hillary's favorability was very, very high until she got back into politics. So let's not forget about that. But it is true. People have warm fuzzies about Joe Biden. He's a much more sort of human person than Hillary Clinton. She was much more capable. Much more capable on the debate stage. She was able to articulate her thoughts in a coherent manner, something that Joe Biden has struggled with. And also, let's be clear-eyed about the fact Donald Trump is a much stronger opponent this time, Elena.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so, anytime you're facing an incumbent candidate,
it's tough.
It's very tough, and it's a huge uphill battle that whoever the nominee is going to be facing once we get through July, or whoever is the clear nominee. And another problem with Joe Biden is, again, I was traveling with the Bloomberg campaign earlier this week in Florida, and I was talking to voters, and I said, what is it about Michael Bloomberg, that you like more than Joe Biden? They're like, well, Joe Biden he seems too old. And when I reminded them, Bloomberg and Bernie Sanders are older than Joe Biden. They were like, really? I had no idea. And I think that is going to be a huge problem that he faces on any debate stage, whether it be one-on-one with Bernie Sanders or one-on-one with President Trump.
Yeah.
And I also think he does have the same issue that Hillary had, the idea of being an establishment Democrat. We saw how much that mattered to people in 2016. I think it still matters now that we're in 2020, and they're going to be it's going to be an issue that could potentially continue to help Trump.
Couldn't agree more. All right, both of you guys hold your thoughts. We're going to be back right after a quick break. We'll see you in a second.